It's Luther Wilson III on another YouTube video. As a lot of you know, I'm a real estate professional here in the Kansas City market, representing for Upside Property Services. We're doing sales, investing, and lending mostly for real estate investors, okay? And in today's session, I want to talk about funding and financing for real estate investors, okay? There's the capital aspect, and then you got the real estate financing aspect. And a lot of investors, you know, early on, we're looking for opportunities, we're looking for deals, and we may not think about long-term, the financing, the operations, okay? And I talk about three big things when it comes to real estate investing, all right? There's the capital piece, there's the strategy, and then there's the operations. And I want to focus more so on the capital piece today, but I can't talk about that without getting into some of the others a little bit because they tie in together, all right? And so investors come at, okay, real estate from different backgrounds and experiences and so forth. And I think a lot of investors come at it from the front end as a deal finder or a wholesaler, or perhaps a realtor or a lender, okay? You might be an entrepreneur, you might be a contractor or a property manager, okay? Or you might just, you know, kind of come in as a self-employed person who has no experience in real estate, but you got some capital and you want to figure out how to put it to use, or you want to learn more about real estate investing. And so what has helped me and my clients more than almost anything else is getting a handle and a better understanding on the financing and funding. All right, so that's what I want to get into. And so they tie in together because I think most investors, at least for me and my clients, we've used some type of loan, okay? As a realtor, as you know, some of you know my background, growing up in the business, coming in as a leasing agent and property manager, a little bit of wholesaling, assigning, and so forth, before I got, you know, more experience in the operations and then investing from there. And as a realtor years ago, it was a little different because property values were cheaper. There seemed to be more inventory. The opportunities were a little bit different. And so most of my transactions as a realtor years ago up through maybe 2018 were mostly cash transactions. In and around Kansas City, that's where we operate. We could do C-class, B-class, and lower end types of homes. And my clients could scoop up properties for 10, 20, 30 grand. Some of my investor clients who were doing B-class properties could scoop deals up for 50, 60, 70, $80,000, maybe a little bit higher. And so today, you know, 2024, by the way, today's Monday, October 28th, things are quite a bit different. And I think the financing and funding piece is ever important because real estate has become a little more glamorized and popular over the years with HGTV and so forth. And then as the inventory has been somewhat lower the last several years, it's made the whole thing different. It's made the environment and the market a little bit different, okay? And so I think getting a handle on the funding and financing is gonna help you. If you're tuning in, you're probably doing real estate of some type. So thank you for tuning in and, you know, as I share my story and so forth, all right? And when I think about funding and financing, the different types of loans, all right, because cash transactions still happen. I think they're mostly happening in C-class areas and in some low-end homes. But for the most part, investors are forced to use some type of funding, or it could be a line of credit. It could be some type of short-term debt, okay? You got short-term debt, long-term debt, and then you got medium-term debt. And I look at it, you know, the short-term funding, it could be hard money, all right? It could be money from an associate or a colleague, friend, or family member, and it's gonna be, in a lot of cases, interest only, okay? There's gonna be a balloon, and it's gonna be needed to be paid in full within 6 months to 12 months, maybe up to a year or perhaps longer. That's the short-term debt. When you're talking medium-term debt, it could be structured a number of different ways, but I think of maybe 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 to 7 years, and it could be interest only. It might, be amortized for 20 to 30 years, but at that 2 to 3 or maybe up to 5 to 7 year mark, you're gonna have to restructure things. That could be a refi or a resale. So that's what I see as the medium term. And then the long-term financing or long-term debt for real estate investors, I'm looking at 15 to 20 to 30 year mortgages, okay? And ideally, we're gonna have that fully amortized. The gold standard seems to be 30-year fixed interest rate mortgages, okay? And for real estate investors, a lot of it is gonna be some type of non-QM mortgage, all right? DSCR just happens to be one of the most popular ones. However, there are other types of non-qualified mortgages that real estate investors can use, okay? So when it comes to the financing, you got short-term, medium-term, long-term, and then the funding part, I like to refer to that as gap funds, because along the way, you're gonna need to put money into the property, into the operation, or both in a lot of cases. And so how that looks depends on the opportunity or the deal that you find, what comes your way, and then the cost of the money on the front end, the cost of the funding or those gap funds, however that looks for you, because a lot of times it's gonna be borrowed money, even the funding part. You got the financing part, but then you got the funding part to fill those gaps. So, you might come across an opportunity, all right? And you wanna flip a house because as investors, for whatever reasons, like that seems to be a decent entry point, or an entry point where most of us look, all right? There's a fixer-upper, it's a single family home, it's off market, and we wanna flip it, right? And so we may not have all the cash ourselves to be able to do that, okay? We might have someone close to us who has the cash to be able to do that, or we're gonna have to look at using some type of loan to be able to fund that, fix and flip, to be able to acquire it and rehab and resell that property. So depending on, the timing, a lot of times you're gonna have to move quick, right? Or you think you do, because it's an opportunity that comes your way and you don't wanna let it slip away, all right? I know that feeling very well. And so you gotta decide, okay, if you found the deal, then you gotta figure out who's gonna fund it. If you're not able to fund it, are you gonna bring in, you could look at bringing in a JV partner. You could look at bringing in someone just to loan you the money, or you could look at using a hard money loan or some type of short-term financing, all right? And a lot of times it's gonna be not the full amount that you need necessarily. And if the investor or the lender says that it's the full amount that you're gonna need for the purchase and the renovation, then you gotta have to figure out, they might give you all of that in a lump sum. Odds are they're gonna want to break that up somehow. So if you can, most of the time, I know so many investors, I've helped a ton of investors as a realtor and a practitioner, and they're using either a hard money loan or some type of short-term funding, and it's gonna be maybe 8 to 10%, more like 10 to 15%, with somewhere between 1 and 5 points of extra interest that you gotta pay on top of that at some point, maybe up front when you acquire the property, or if not, you're gonna get hit on the back end with those points somehow, all right? And so getting through the renovation process is key, all right? And having funds to be able to do that over and above what your lender, okay, has said that they're going to loan you. Because again, they may not give you all of the necessary money needed to be able to purchase, renovate, and there's always something that comes up. So you look at reserves, you want to have some type of reserves for the incidentals, overages on the rehab, holding costs, you got utilities, insurance, and so on. And so those gap funds are key. That's why I say funding and financing, okay? And this is just one example on a single family home that needs renovation, it needs work. And you may not necessarily flip it to resell it, but you may want to rehab and refinance and keep it, same thing, okay? Because acquiring the property and then getting through the renovation, that's why those additional funds are so important, okay? And so that's a bit on the short-term financing, right? If you're gonna keep the property, then of course you're gonna refi and then get some type of long-term or medium-term financing, all right? And then as far as those go, like for investors, especially in 2024, if you find a decent opportunity and you have the resources and the means to be able to do it, and you think it's a solid play, give it a shot, okay? Value add can be very, very good for investing. It's just, you gotta be prepared, okay, when you're taking on the renovation, because there's just always something that comes up. And so something that we've been encouraging, because as a real estate pro, I help investors to source or secure capital for their projects, okay? Part of the inspiration for that, right? And part of the reason for me doing these videos is to, of course, educate, inspire, and collaborate. But part of the inspiration for me wanting to get into the real estate finance space a little over a year ago was because of the challenges and obstacles that me and my partners and my clients had faced. And it put a fire up under me. And I realized, like, wow, it's a whole other world. The funding and financing, not even mentioning the private equity and private capital and so forth. I mean, you could refer back to some of my previous videos where I talk about that, but it's a whole world that a lot of real estate investors are neglecting, or maybe there's some fear there, of course, but I'm encouraging y'all to dive deeper into the real estate finance space, the private equity, the private capital, and so forth, because once we started to look into that, it changed everything for us. And so the investors, we're looking at these opportunities, not really thinking about how it may play out during the process and then getting through a resale or a refi. And so much of what we as an investors can do, okay, how we can invest, depends on how much capital we have access to on the front end. Liquid capital, right, that we can deploy. And then the type of financing that's available to us. The cost of the money, what's being charged for us to use that money, okay? And how long we can use it, when we need to pay it back. You may not have a solid handle on all of it, but knowing that, at least having a general idea of what that's gonna be like is gonna help you. That basically helps determine how you can invest it, all right? If a lot of hard money lenders, a lot of us investors, we're looking at short-term transactions, and I think part of that is because the way that the real estate financing and the private lending game is set up, okay? And look, I'm just encouraging you to take a deep dive into that, all right? I don't want to get too carried away, but I want to, focus. I got some more notes here. I think I might have covered everything, all right? So a big part of what I do and what I encourage my clients and partners to look at is long-term investing, all right? A lot of what we have done is for long-term investments, buy and hold, investments that'll produce cash flow over the long term. All right. I believe that that's what can free a lot of us up and help us create more wealth. And so if you're looking at doing that, then it's ever important to look at the funding and financing. All right. And I think I might have gotten everything. You know, once you have a handle on the funding and financing, it makes the process so much easier. All right. So I'm gonna go a little short. I'm leaving it there today. All right. So it's Luther Wilson III. Keep me in mind again. We're in the Kansas City market. So if you want to learn a little bit more about who we are, how we operate, feel free to reach out to us, and have a blessed day. Thanks for tuning in. Peace.